audio. Either way, we're good.
All right.
So I want people to know the story that is Steve Chang, because you have that story that so many people want to follow into coffee, and that so many people I hear that contact me and say, hey, so like I've got all this experience in this other field and I really want to get into coffee and it can't be that hard, can it? And I have a bunch of money over here that I want to just dump into this.
Yeah.
And I put a lot of effort into trying to convince them not to do it.
Yeah.
And you are somebody who has done it. And we were having a conversation the other day about how we're in our mid-career years, people who follow the map of forward maps, and this is not what we thought it would end up looking like in both of our businesses.
Yeah.
So tell people where you came from with regards to the Steve Chang story.
Yeah, without taking up all day to tell my life story, I think...
but it's an interesting story, so it warrants the conversation.
I'll start at 8, and I know it sounds like it's going to be long, but I'll make it quick. I immigrated to America when I was 8 years old, and my parents, like many immigrants, started with a series of small businesses. So when you don't speak the language, you weren't educated here, no matter what you know, what your experiences are, it doesn't translate, so you have to start over. And so for someone like my father, who was a plant director for many years and had a lot of high-level experiences, coming here, he couldn't just go back and start an hourly wage job. And so for him, he ended up starting a series of small businesses. So since I was 8, I was involved in small business, because if you're an immigrant family, if your family's in small business, you're in small business, right?
Totally.
So I was pushing around the broom and mopping since I was 9, 10. My parents had everything from a wig shop to a market to a photo shop to eventually to a small motel. But through that process, I got a chance to learn a lot about small businesses and what it means to run a small business. And I remember clearly saying, as I was heading into college, I will never, ever do a small business in my life. I can't live that life, right? And
I said the same thing.
Yeah. I think that's the one thing I learned, is never say never. It actually does come back. And then after that, I went to college, and when I graduated from college, the LA riots had happened, the civil unrest, and so I got really interested in doing...
You were graduating from college when that happened?
Yeah, so...
I'm going through learning about the LA riots now.
Yeah.
Holy shit.
Yeah, so I was graduating in June, and this was April 29th, I still remember it, and it was just crazy times. And I remember driving in with a bunch of my friends to help some store owners pack some stuff out, and there was a building on fire across the street, police officers protecting the firefighters. There was occasionally somebody would drive by and shoot a gun. There was a group of like 40, 50 people waiting outside to loot the store, and we were helping the store owner take stuff off the back. I was seeing
in the documentary, and there were, I'm pretty sure they were Korean store owners that were protecting their stores with
that's a
guns.
whole nother block, but that's another group of like people that just took justice into their own hands.
They were standing there with machine guns.
There was actually a gun store in Koreatown who was on the radio saying, hey, if you're a store owner and you give me your ID, I'll give you a gun to borrow, to protect yourself. Yeah, it was like that. So it was a crazy time. And
what business did your dad have at the time?
My parents were in the Photoshop business, but they were all the way out in Long Beach, so this doesn't affect them at all. But I think the thing that I got out of it was the instability of the race relations in Los Angeles, and felt like it was something I had to do something about, not just watch. And very impressionable, just coming out of college as well.
What did you study?
History, because my intent was to go to law school. So while I was applying to law school and getting ready for LSATs, I decided to take on a job doing post-riot work, race relations work, and instead of going to law school, I ended up becoming a mediator, because that became a passion of mine. So conflict resolutions, race relations work.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so I ended up working at a nonprofit agency and became an executive director of an agency called Asian Pacific American Dispute Resolution Center. And I would train other mediators, did a lot of Korean Black conflict resolution back then. Yeah.
traditionally those two cultures not see eye to eye here in America?
No, it's not a traditional thing. It's just that we happen to be in the same cauldron. You know, we're thrown in. It's a small area where we're kind of mixed in together. You got to imagine there's forces beyond just two cultures that don't understand each
for
other.
Sure.
Yeah, it's after the Watts riots, all the big businesses left South Central and Central LA. Meaning none of the markets would come in. So there was a dearth of grocery stores and services.
That the same thing was going to happen again?
Right, and which did. It happened again, right?
What was the second riot that happened?
So Watts riots was the first one.
And
LA riots was the second big one. Yeah. So a lot of immigrants started taking up that need, that demand for stores, and they can't afford to open large stores, so they were opening up liquor stores everywhere.
Right.
And in a liquor store, everything, your most profit margin product in a liquor store is liquor. And that's the one that sells the most. And that's what it becomes known as. But they're also providing a lot of other things, bread and milk and eggs and a few, the basic necessities of life, right? So
of course, because when you want to go and get your whiskey, that's when you go and get your...
Yeah, breakfast items, cereal. But, yeah. I mean,
this
imagine,
country fascinates me so much.
All of that is happening with all these economic pressures. So when the powder keg goes off on an issue that had nothing to do with Koreans and blacks, it slips right into that. Remember, what lit the fuse was the Rodney King incident, and it was police and an African American gentleman who was pulled over. That incident sets off a thing that turns into
reaction. And there was a situation that happened beforehand that
there was another shooting, liquor store. So but these are all little powder kegs, and so the result of that for me was I got to do something about it. So that's how I got involved in doing.
How many
mediation.
years have you been in America at this point?
So I immigrated in 78. 78, 79, 78, late 78, early 79, and then this was. So I was in my 20s when this happened.
And at that point, did you feel American or were you still feeling Korean?
Oh no, I don't think you can separate the two. It's not like I get that. Yeah, I remember waking up when I was in junior high school and realized I just dreamt in English. And that's when I knew I was American.
Okay.
But I'm never going to give up kimchi, and my family's Korean. None of that is changing. And, so the nice thing about being in a place like America, in Los Angeles especially, is that it's so diverse. It's easy to be who you are ethnically here, more so than any other country in the world. Yeah. And I think sometimes we forget that's actually a part of this country's history that I think we need to embrace and say, that's actually good. We are one of the most diverse countries in the world, and there's some amazing things here that I couldn't do if I was in any other place.
I describe America like a quilt.
Yeah.
It's a piece of material from here and a piece of material from here and here and here and here. And all of these sewn together is what actually makes this quilt America.
I mean, I think I used to call it a tossed salad, but it's definitely not a melting pot because we're not melting together. We're still maintaining
There's
individual...
still separate islands of cultures, but they coexist in a way. Yeah. Australia is very similar, but I'm still trying to decide which country is more racist.
Well, I don't think any one country owns the rights to racism.
No,
all the racists in Korea are Korean. So
the interesting thing about it, when we have the race conversation, and the reason I think that people need to look at the race discussion differently is that that they have that saying that if my brother is my enemy, that when my brother and I are against another enemy, we are brothers. Yeah. Right. There's that kind of thing. And the reason I say that is because, so the Arabs might be arguing with the Italians, but I guarantee you that inside the Arabs, the Syrians and the Lebanese and the Iraqis,
they don't get along either.
None of them get along either. But because we're now all against the Italians, everyone who considers themselves Arab is fine. Yeah. We'll all be brothers for 35 seconds while there's going to be this war against the Italians. But then we'll go back to hating each other. There's a racism, and then there's just a lack of cohesion.
Yeah, and I'm not sure that's ever going away. But I like being in a country that thinks and believes and hopes that we could solve that.
Do you think it does?
Yeah, I think there's a desire. It's a dream. It's a hope. I think it's a hope because all the people who are coming here is because this is one of those places where you can come and hope that, ask for that, demand that.
That's
even if you don't get it, at least there's a platform here that we could point back to and say, well, no, we have a right to say things, and there's a way to be heard here that I'm not sure that it is always the case everywhere else, because there isn't a cohesive one group anywhere, right? So even when you say the word whites, I hate that word because that describes learn it until I came here. Such a wide variety of people. I have no idea.
I'm fake white.
Right.
I say that to people all the time. I can walk around and people think I'm Irish, but I'm fake white.
Yeah, so the whole conversation about what American is I think up for debate here. More so than in any other country where if you say you're Korean, it actually means something and it's very well defined. Oh, totally.
But in Australia, there's a similar... Australia is like the baby brother of America.
Right.
The thing that I feel here is there's a jousting that's going on between what you're saying and the people who actually don't want that kind of peace.
Definition happening, right? And I think that's a natural process, though. It doesn't surprise me.
It's a part of the sorting it out kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Well,
one of the things I got out of the whole conflict resolution experience was that you can't have change without conflict. If there's no conflict, everything stays the same. So conflict is a necessary step in the process of saying we need to grow or we need to develop or we need to look at things differently. You don't get that until there is some catalyst that causes that conversation to happen. So in some way, I embrace the fact that we're going through what we're going through as a country right now. And, and for some communities, this conversation's been going on for generations and generations. So it hasn't really changed. But these moments, I mean, there's no civil rights movement without what happened in Selma. There's there's no America without what happened, we were a rebellion. That's how we started as a country. Yeah. So I think there's this sort of sense that, things are not looking great, but for me, it's part of the process. I'm looking forward to what comes after this. It's the long game. And how this connects to coffee for me is...
I was just about to say that. Yes, go ahead.
So I'm going to put a pin there and I'll come back to it. Right?
I'm right there with you. Absolutely.
And so one of the things that happened was after I worked in nonprofit for about 8 years, I ended up going into my wife's family business. And they had a noodle...
Shout out to the awesome Miss Elena.
Yeah. The Yi family had a business called the Passport Food Group, which is... they made noodles and egg roll skins and wonton skins and things of that nature. We had crispy noodles for your salad toppers. So we used to sell to a lot of national chains. And so my father-in-law, who was running that business for 30 years, was in the middle of treatment for leukemia. And he was diagnosed with leukemia and asked us to come and help out while he's going through that treatment. So I ended up going into the business thinking I was going to be there for a couple of years, then go back to my career in mediation, and ended up being there 12 years. And,
now you've had enough by this time experience in family business to know that there's no chance.
You should have seen the look on my father's face when I told him I'm leaving mediation and going into a family business, except I'm not going to his family business, I'm going to my wife's family business.
That makes me laugh. Only because, my dad's an entrepreneur as well. So
you could have knocked him over with a feather. He was what? I think he was a little hurt, and we have had years of.
And to your wife's family,
that was the deal breaker for him. But it was 12 amazing years of learning how to run a business under the mentorship of my father-in-law, my brother-in-laws, my sister-in-law. We did it as a family. It was one of those situations where we would go, I quit, I'm so mad. Okay, see you tomorrow. It's
totally right.
Yeah. And so learned a lot about business and running a business, what it means to turn a profit. And about 7 years ago, we ended up selling the business. My father-in-law had passed away, and we had to make a decision as a family whether to keep it going. Or not, and each do our own thing. And we decided, this was difficult to try to do it with everybody involved in the same way. And why don't we let each other pursue their own passions? Right. So
he was the heart of the business.
He was
and the brains and
he was the heart. He was the founder for sure. But I got to give credit to all my in-laws, my brother-in-law Kenny and Mike and my sister-in-law Suzanne.
Shout out to Suzanne.
Yeah, they all added greatly to the final success of the business.
But there's such, like as a family, your in-laws have such consideration for each other.
And I think that's what...
They're a real team.
That's what I mean by having gone through conflict, right? Yeah. So if we didn't go to conflict, have all the conflict that we did, I don't think we would have developed the thick skin and the sinews that kind of bind us together. Yeah. Which is, I'm going to come back to this too a little bit later, because there are times when I feel like, oh yes, please. One of the things that I think happens is that a lot of folks in coffee will face conflict and then shy away from it rather than embrace it as part of the way forward to the next thing. But yeah, after I finished, it was way too late for me to go back to race relations work, and I had left that. I hadn't touched it in 12 years, so I was trying to figure out what next. And I love coffee and I love baseball. And then outside of my faith and family, those are the two things that I spend most time on.
And we should just qualify, like this wasn't a small noodle company. This was the largest.
Sizable. Yeah.
Wasn't it the largest noodle producer in the country?
Fresh noodles.
Fresh noodles.
Yeah. We moved about 1 million pounds of flour a month. Amount of things.
We're not talking about a little noodle factory.
No, we weren't.
This is a major manufacturing situation.
In fact, if you during that time had an egg roll at a national chain restaurant, that wrapping was probably from our company. It sounds bigger, like when you say that, it's like this huge. Well, it was, but there's like 30 skins in one pack, and you get 4 on a plate. So there had to be a lot of egg roll sales for us to sell one package of skins. But it was a business that my father-in-law built that business on his... he was here at a time when banks weren't going to give an immigrant a loan. So he was building that. He would work at the factory all morning. In the afternoon, go to his other job at the post office, work the night shift at the post office, come home, sleep 4 hours, and go start the day again. He did that for 20 years.
That reminds me of my dad.
He retired with full pension from the post office.
Are you serious?
No, he... fully worked out his years to retirement. Yeah, he needed to do that in order to feed the family because the business was losing money in the beginning.
Well, hi, we both know that
story. And so when I hear that he did that for 20 years, and it was only the final 10, 12 years that we start to really see profit and benefit and growth come.
Yeah.
And then you hear people talking about I've been in the business for 2-3 years and it's too tough. I always kind of remember that because I've hit that wall myself where I go, oh, this is too hard, I don't know. And then I have to remember my father-in-law did that for 20 years, 2 jobs.
And it is a very different kind of landscape now, but not really.
No.
Like the human spirit is still the same that's required to be able to do.
So he never saw leaving as an option. He never saw not doing noodles as an option. He always saw it as, well, no, this is who I am, what I do. This is what I'm doing for my family. So it was never... He was
obviously an immigrant as well. Around the same time as your parents?
Yeah, a little bit
earlier.
Yeah, earlier. He was a force of nature.
Really?
He not only went to had 2 jobs and did that, he also took night courses and graduated from Cal State.
He sounds like my kind of friend.
Yeah, he's just, he's one of these people who are just amazingly gifted in absorbing information.
Yeah, wow.
So he would read the same
Curious.
book. Yeah, he would read the same book in English and in Cantonese or in Chinese so that he could make sure he got the full gist of what the author was saying. But he was that kind of person. So I learned a lot about what it means to stick to it. And my father was the same way. My own father was the same kind of like... there was no such thing as should I do this or should I do that. Every business he started, he had no idea what he was doing. He didn't know anything about photography when he bought the Photoshop. And by the time he finished, he was an expert at photo editing, photo processing, chemical. Like he was an expert, but it took him a good 5-6 years. But and, he retired. His idea of retirement is he's doing a coin laundry in Eagle Rock. I think he's the only 5-star rated Yelp review coin laundry in Los Angeles.
That now?
He's doing that. That's his retirement. So, there's no such thing as too small of a job or too. Yeah. He's that kind of a person, and those are the things.
5-star rated on Yelp.
I don't have 5 stars in my own coffee shop. He's got a coin laundry with 5 stars, and so. I mean, that's the kind of, I think, work ethic that they try to put in me, and I got it from both sides of my, my important mentors in my life. Yeah, we sold the business, trying to figure out what next to do. Too late for baseball career, and so I thought coffee is what I want to get into, and so I took a year off and went and researched coffee. And the nice thing was, the 12 years that we put in and the 30 plus years that my father-in-law put into that business paid for enough of an exit for the family that we could have time to go put that effort in and energy into try to learn stuff. So went to spend time in Europe and visit all these coffee shops. I wanted to do a sort of a historical tour of coffee, right? Okay. So I wanted to follow its path. So if you look at it, I'm a history major, so I'm a history buff too, but I wanted to go where coffee shops started. In Venice, in St. Mark's, there's a coffee shop that's been around for generations, because this was one of the few places where coffee was cafes, not coffee. Cafes were important because they were trading with the Turks and folks from the Middle East who couldn't sit in a restaurant with wine because they were Orthodox, and so they created coffee shops to be able to have a place where business people can negotiate and.
I hadn't thought of it like that.
So those are the modern coffee shops that actually begat what we experience as the cafe, right? Yeah. And so I went to places in Paris where these artists used to meet and argue over, so I wanted that experience of what it's like, what that space feels. Yeah, and then visited Seattle, Chicago, Boston, Portland, San Francisco, wherever there was a coffee mecca. I mean, now LA would definitely have to be on that map, and San Diego is definitely coming up to par with that as well. But there's this sort of hunger for me to try to understand what was going on in the coffee world. And then I spent a month down in Costa Rica picking cherries, processing it, just going through a whole process of learning. I was trying to understand how to I was being taught agronomy from a coffee farmer in Spanish that was being translated by a friend of mine to me in English, and then I have to try to figure out how to.
That's your father-in-law reading it in English and Cantonese just to make sure.
Just trying to absorb it. I think I got maybe 30% of what was being taught to me, but.
And the end result is this is really hard.
Yeah, but that's where it was a real interesting twist for me, because I was on the last day being taught how to make latte art by a 23-year-old barista, Melina. She was, I think, number 2 in Costa Rica's barista championships at that time. Okay. And really, really amazing barista. But she's teaching me, and I'm learning how to do this. And, she just wants me to make a simple heart. And I get circles, I get butts, I get pumpkins, I get peaches, anything but a heart. And it's frustrating me, right? I have a master's degree from UCLA. I've done stuff. Why can't I figure out how to do this damn thing, right? It seems so simple. And she looks over at me and she goes, "It's because you don't love coffee yet." And it kneecapped me. I was like, what are you saying to me? Yeah. You're 20-something-year-old telling me this Yoda phrase about you don't love coffee yet? And I'm going, what are you talking about?
Do you know how much money I just spent?
Exactly, right? I just invested a ton of money to do this, and you're telling me I don't love coffee? Yeah. And she goes, don't take it, because she could tell I was offended. I didn't say all this to her, but she could tell I was offended. So she's like, my grandfather's a coffee farmer. My father's a coffee farmer. Right. All my uncles are coffee farmers. My brothers are coffee farmers. I've been a barista since I was 13. When I tell you I love coffee, it means something very different.
She bleeds it.
Yeah. And I had nothing to say because she was absolutely right. And it floored me. And I got this at the end of the month I was there. I stayed in Costa Rica for about a month. And it was at the end of it. Yeah. Part of me was thinking, you should have told me at the beginning. I would have gotten back on the plane. And
I'm lucky she didn't.
Yeah.
We would not be sitting here.
Exactly. So I'm on the plane, coming back home, and I'm journaling all the things that I've learned and trying to take notes. And I couldn't get over her telling me you didn't love coffee. And this thought of, do I have to spend 13 years like she did, 13, 14, 10 years plus to become someone who's in love with coffee? How do I get in love with coffee then, right? And so I was frustrated with this. And then it really hit me. I don't love coffee. I love cafes. Yeah. That's what I love.
Community connection.
Yeah, and this is what goes back to my original start after college.
I so relate.
When I talk about community and a place where people belong and people come in, and I'm talking about not just, hey, I got to give back to this community or I got to give back to that community. there's a place where people need to meet. It's important. There's a little square in Lamar Park in Central LA where people get together on Saturdays, and there's community there. Recently, when we opened up in our location in Carmel Valley, Seabreeze property called Merge, the developer.
Beautiful shop.
Yeah, thank you.
Beautiful shop.
Yeah, he came in at the grand opening. He wanted to say a few words, and he said, I wanted to find the partner to help me create a space where parents run into each other outside of school.
This is Darren?
This is Darren's father,
Darren's
Gary.
father.
Yeah, and so I wanted a place where people kind of bang into each other as they're going through about their daily business, and it's a place where you catch up with somebody. But that's where community is about, and it's having a place where people gather. So I look back at my coffee history, and I can't tell you what origins and this and that, and these are my favorite drinks, but I can tell you what coffee shops meant something to me. It's
where you wrote your dissertation for. Yeah. You know where you used to go and hang out with people.
My first dates are in coffee shops. Totally. My last dates are in coffee shops. I love saying that because I've said a lot of last dates in coffee shops, initiated by them or by me. But there's a history. There's a history there, and there's a context to it. Coffee shop. You go to a bar and you go, "Hey, how you doing?" to somebody who doesn't know you. It's not always seen as how you doing. It's seen as how you doing, right? Yeah. Which is a totally different context. But in coffee shop, the barriers are down. People connect a little bit more. There's a lot more conversation happening.
And it's approachable.
It's approachable. And I'm not spending $25 to enter into a club to, sit down. Yeah. The drink is $4 to $6. You get something to eat. Under $10, you can have a great 2 hours.
Yeah.
And
with Wi-Fi.
With Wi-Fi, right? So. And that's actually, I used to hate it, but now I understand how that's part of the community. So I've learned to accept that and embrace that.
I do want to talk to you about that.
Oh yeah, that's actually a fun conversation. But I realized that's what I wanted to do, is create spaces where community happens, right? And I don't mean community, again, like giving or... I want to create places where... We're all about giving, by the way. We have a whole blend that's just meant for a giving program where every bag we sell, a portion of that goes to one organization, and so we partner with them. The Kids Hospital, right? Is it a kid? Every year we have a different organization we partner with. You did it with the Kids Hospital. We did it with Children's Hospital 2 years ago. Yeah, and that wasn't just to the hospital in general. It was actually to the nurse teaching program that we partnered with, that we really believe. Last year was all about a homeless program in Orange County. There's a huge issue going on over there that we wanted to help. It's all over California. It is. But so there's these things that we're doing that says, yes, we want to, but that's got nothing to do with us saying we want to enjoy. That should be something we do as owners and as baristas and as people in the industry, because that's what we care about. That's not something I'm not going waving my flag and going, hey, we're good people. That's not it at all. That's something we do because that's who we are. But I'm talking about community in the sense of it's a place where people gather. And it's not for a specific group of people. I don't want it to be for just the millennials or just the Gen Xers or just anything. It should be where different age groups, different gender groups, everything comes and kind of crashing in, because everybody needs caffeine at some point in the day.
And it's a potentiality. Yeah. Like that's what I see our role is in the community when we create cafes. We create a canvas of potentiality for the people that walk in. Because the one
thing I learned during my time, and this is why that piece is an important part of my coffee journey. Yeah. One thing I learned working on Black Korean race relations was the reason that happened, where they ended up targeting one another in that fight when it had didn't really start there. The spark wasn't there. Spark was elsewhere. Yeah. Was because there was no connectivity tissue other than a transactional one, where you buy something from me, I take money from you. Right. That was the only relationship between the store owner and the customer. Yeah. The stores that didn't get burned, there were stores where the customers themselves stood outside and told people who were threatening to go away.
Really?
There were, and I'm really fascinated, so I wanted to talk to them, and it turns out...
Oh, I've got chills.
Yeah, it's because the store owners there were on a first-name basis with their customer. They had a relationship. So for me, when I say I want the coffee shops at Copa Vida coffee shops to be community-minded, I want us to help create a place in any given city we go to where people come and meet and make those connective tissues that are beyond transactions. So here's the thing that's different about you, though. Yeah.
And I have the luxury of knowing you and the team behind what has created Copa Vida.
Yeah.
And I talk a lot about defining the culture, understanding what the values are, understanding how you want to translate that experience for your customers. And you are one of the very few brands that I have seen whereby your brand is a reflection of who you are. Legitimately. Like, I look at your cafes and I can see the people that I know behind this have created this. This is not created you know, some people bring in an external branding company. Whether you've done that or not.
We actually have not.
and I know that you haven't, but whether you have done that or not, you have beautiful cafes.
Thank you.
And I remember, I don't know if you remember, but when I first came to America, your shop in Pasadena and the one in San Diego were the only two shops that I had seen that reminded me of Australian cafes.
Well, that probably is because when we were getting our inspiration board together, most of the pictures were of Sydney and Melbourne coffee shops. And the reason for that was we wrote down our values on a piece of paper. In the beginning, we fought over everything. Sam, Frank, Doe. These were the folks that started with us, and in the beginning we butted heads a lot. So on that plane, as I realized I love cafes, not coffee. The second realization was I got to go find partners who love coffee, like
and they're
Melina
great
did.
Humans.
Right. So it was easy for me to connect to Frank and Sam, and then they ended up coming working on this, and we were doing it together. And in the beginning, it was very cacophonous because I wanted to have a coffee shop look a certain way based on what I felt was a customer's perspective.
Okay.
Right. They wanted to design it based on, Frank wanted to design it based on flow.
Okay.
This is what's best for a barista working behind the bar. Sam wanted it based on feel, look, touch, how it all melts together.
And Doe?
And Doe was always looking at our budget.
and so shout out to Miss Doe here. She's a fucking rock star. And the reason I say that is because Doe seems to be the best word I can find to describe Doe's role in all of this is she is the glue.
Yeah.
So she's
the person you can't see it. When glue dries, it's clear.
Yeah.
And so her work is really hard to see, but she is definitely the person who fills the cracks, makes sure things are getting paid. We don't have to worry about whether the lights are going to be on tomorrow.
No.
She makes sure it's going to be
And
on.
she asks the questions that will plant the seed without you realizing you need to think about something.
The great thing is she's also an amazing tea expert. So that's how
she is.
she jumps into our group. But so we were going through that and we realized in our design that we were coming from it sounded cacophonous because we're all speaking different languages.
Yeah.
So we went back to saying, what are our values? Well, we want to be a company known as being approachable and welcoming, transparent in our artisanal in our approach, and community-minded. Okay, so let's go with that.
Okay.
If it doesn't feel like it's filling one of those values, we choose against it. If it feels like it, then
fall back onto the paper.
Yeah.
Right?
So when we did the bar design, we angled it in, and Frank liked to angle it in a little bit because it actually helps with the bar flow because it's easier to go from one side to the other that way versus it being this and you're going straight back and forth. But at the same time, that angle in made it feel like we were telling people to come in and it didn't feel like a wall.
Yeah.
Great. Sam wanted certain pieces, but everything was about warmth. He wanted different heights. In the beginning, I was like, that's inefficient. If I bought the same 25 chairs, I get a much better pricing than 10 of this, and 10 of that. But he's like, no, there are people who are going to like it this height, people who are going to like it that height. There are people with kids. There are people who have laptops. They're not going to sit, So he's thinking about it from approachability. Okay, so I have to give into that, right? So there are chairs he chose that I couldn't agree.
I remember.
I was like, do you see the price on these things? We still have those chairs. And they're
they
great. And they're brand
I remember I was in there the other day and I looked at these chairs and I always chuckled to myself because I remember how much they cost.
Yeah.
And I remember you commenting about how, so Sam paid this much for chairs and I don't know if it's the right thing to do or not, but we'll know down the road. And I have to let him make that decision.
And I couldn't go back on this thing we started on, which was we're making these decisions based on values and not just simply on budget and not simply on design and not simply on opinion.
But I've got to give you kudos here because your vision long term is to cultivate future leaders. and you and I had that conversation from early on, and I feel like a massive part of that is giving people the room to
make
learn,
mistakes.
well, to learn whether this is going to be a mistake or not, and healthy distance to ask themselves that question.
Yeah. My father-in-law taught me that more than anybody else. He gave me the helm to projects that were way above my pay grade.
Yeah.
Within 6 months, I was working on a $1.5 million rebuild project for one of our production facilities. At that point, I had zero experience in ever doing anything like that. And he gave me space to learn how to do it, and then actually supported me in making some of those decisions. And so he taught me what it was to actually give somebody room to fall down a few places and still get up and do that. Luckily, he had another whole segment of the company that was generating enough profit for me to take a chance. And I think that's an important piece of it, but it's also self-serving. I'm not doing this because I'm this magnanimous guy who just wants to support people and watch them grow. I absolutely do.
You want to make money though.
But I also know that if this is going to have longevity, I got to think, if I'm looking at the long game, I don't want to be here 10 years from now doing similar work and not able to grow past a certain size because my hands can't reach anymore. My parents were amazing small business owners. They never operated more than one. They couldn't. They never scaled anything. They never made room. If I don't have a Sam Hong, I don't have a Frank Law, I don't have a Do Kim or a Tebum or a Christopher. These guys are the key members in my management team. If I don't have a Ruth, if I don't have Curtis at East Village, there's no way I grow this business. There's no way. There's no way for me to have 7. I couldn't manage 7 by myself. I would never see my children or my wife. Nor do you want to. Nor do I want to. No, at that point, it's no longer about coffee. It's about driving. If I went to one shop a week, I'd be I'm maxed out.
That's it. Yeah, you can't. And it's not a lifestyle. Like, we get into doing this thing called business ownership because we're trying to better ourselves and better our livelihoods and better everything about our lives. Yeah. And hopefully enrich the lives of other people.
Yeah. And any coffee shop, any business is a pyramid, and it's really thin at the top. So as you try to progress in your career, whether you started as a shift lead or a barista or in the kitchen doing dishes or whatever, as you're trying to move up, the number of opportunities keep shrinking at an much faster rate than there are people who are wanting that opportunity. And so it's not just about competition, but there's nothing to even fight over. Right, so unless I'm helping to grow the business as someone who's the CEO, if I'm not making
you're taking up someone's job.
Yeah, and if I'm working behind the bar, then I'm taking someone's job in that sense. But I also will never get a chance to do that. Now, it's easy to say; it's very difficult to do. I am so blessed to have found partners who share in my faith and my beliefs in terms of what we want as a coffee shop, but who also care about the things I care about to the point where it's okay for me to trust them to do things. Yeah. So you're saying I was giving them room to make mistakes. And yes, that is true to a degree, but that wasn't because that trust wasn't earned. These were people who are I wasn't just magnanimous and saying, go ahead, use my money to go make mistakes. That's not what happened. No. These are people I trust because they've shown me along the way that this is what they're capable of. They've done this before. So it's a risk for sure, but it's a calculated risk in saying, I wouldn't just go, here's my children, but because I love them and I want to give them room to, here's the key to the car, go ahead and have fun with it. I have to make sure they, actually can do some of the things that they want to do before giving them the freedom to go ahead and make that mistake, right? So as I'm saying that, I sound patronizing because Sam and Frank are not my children; they're my partners. But it's that as a business owner, it's
you are a parent.
Yeah,
but you're not a parent of just people. You're a parent of the experience that everybody is meant to have in this thing. Yeah. I refer to it as a ship steerer. Yeah. I'm steering this ship. Yeah. And it's not going to go in any direction if everyone's trying to pull it in different directions.
Yeah, and it's really interesting you bring that up because one of the models that I've been taught for leadership was Nelson Mandela's model. Uh-huh. And he said leading a country is like being a shepherd. And a shepherd doesn't stand in front of the herd and say, come here. shepherd actually stands behind the herd and literally pushes people into that direction, but sometimes you have to let the sheep go where they're going to go.
Yeah.
And
hope they don't go off an edge.
Yeah, and then gently bring them back. But and I think that's sometimes how I have to think about what it is I do. Not because, again, I'm Nelson Mandela. I'm not making that connection. I don't have a choice. The business is bigger than what I can handle. It's bigger than what I...
It's a life force, right?
Yeah, so each group of leaders that I've tried to put in place need to make their own directional choices in some of these things, and I have to go with it. And sometimes, more times than not, they're right, and I wasn't. But I also have to go, here's the line. I know you want to do X, Y, and Z. Our budget is our budget.
We don't have the money.
We don't have the money for this.
We don't have the manpower. We have to prepare for... I mean, a big part of leadership is seeing the blind spots that they may not see.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's what our experience is supposed to bring to the table, right? Like, you have these people who are making these decisions, but because they haven't had the experience before, they can't see what's coming further down that may potentially show up and sideswipe you as a blind spot.
Yeah. I think there's like, sometimes I look at it as a big ship, and we think of the captain as someone who sits in the boathouse, or I don't even know what to call it. But you know, they're in that big steering room and they have somebody on the helm and they're sitting in a big chair and going, we're going to go here now, we're going to go here now, give me reports. That's one model of leadership for sure. And I think that's an important role that has to be played. But this captain for a coffee shop has to be able to play multiple roles. Sometimes you've got to be the one sitting on the lookout tower going, you know, here's the iceberg, everybody be careful, and that's what you're yelling. Sometimes you're in the engine room and you got to oil this and grease that and understand what's going on down there. The hard part is, I don't know anybody whose personality says, I'm good at all of these things, or that it comes naturally to me.
You know, that's why I say that business ownership is going to teach you everything you never wanted to know about yourself.
I get this a lot. Steve, you're a success. Number one, I'm not. So as soon as somebody says that, I know they don't know what they're talking about.
I can relate to that statement. So anyone who's watching this is thinking, my God, these two people are so successful. We just have very full lives, and we have a lot of stress, and we are just trying to stay as grounded as we are, and we are absolutely not successful.
No, and I think it depends on your definition of success.
Right.
Yeah. Are you talking about financial success? Are you talking about public image success? Are you talking about actual success? Depending on which way you're asking me, I think I don't agree that I'm a success. If you ask me if I'm fulfilled in what I'm doing, that I think I have found success. Yeah,
that's the other thing. Like, from a personal perspective, I feel very successful. Yeah. Because I'm working for myself. Yeah. I wake up every day and go to sleep every night. Yeah. With peace of mind.
Yeah. For me, it's not peace of mind in the sense that I actually, there are days when I looked at the P&L.
Massive anxiety.
And anxiety attacks
totally.
at night.
But I have peace of mind with regards to my own integrity.
Right. And the thing
That's
is,
huge
I wake up eager to go back to work.
Right.
I want to get back in it.
Totally.
There isn't a sense of, I got to get myself up. I got to get up because
I hate this job. I can't believe I'm still doing this. How do I get rid of it, etc., etc.
I mean, and I think, for anybody in our situation, the only way they're going to get that is to actually evaluate yourself outside of the context of what the business is doing. So for me, it's my faith that fills that piece of it that allows me to go, okay, even if the numbers all tell me that I'm screwed up, I know there's a bigger, broader reason I'm doing this, and I trust in that, and so I can keep, and that's my North Star, right? And ideas keep looking forward ahead, even not even look down right at your feet, because when you do, you keep stumbling, which is a hard thing for, I think, business owners to kind of disengage and back engage.
I've got to ask you, one of the very surprising things to me about the coffee industry in America is how faith-based it is. Because
I've run into a lot of folks who are faith, whose faith is driving some of their work.
And a number of them have come on this podcast and have talked about how their faith is what led them to this industry. Yeah. What is it about that? Why? Why coffee? Is it community-based? Is it why do so many people who faith plays such a big part of their life find the coffee industry?
I don't know if I have an answer for everybody for that. I think for me, it's one of the places where my multiple different passions converge together. That idea of coffee has never been just a product. And for, I would say 99% of the people who are in the coffee industry aren't in the coffee industry just because coffee is so important. It's all the other stuff that comes with coffee, the craft, the art, the people, the customers, hospitality, running a business. All those other things are part and parcel with coffee. And the fact that you get to do with coffee something you love just makes it that much more fun and exciting. And I think that's why for a lot of folks who are in faith, it's really hard for, let's say, if I was a CPA, how do I live out my life doing tax? That's a really hard question. Like, I don't know how to do that. Like, if my job is to find loopholes for people and savings for this, cuts for that, and or look into these numbers, sometimes it's really hard to go, how does my faith align with a job like this or an engineering job? Whereas with a coffee job, because it is about connecting to people, and it's all about connecting to people, it's easier for me to go, oh, this is how I see my faith being lived out through coffee. So I think it generally pulls a lot of people who are into that.
It's interesting you say that. A friend of mine said to me the other day, he is very food conscious, very health conscious, all about functional medicine. And he said something to me that is now, I'm starting to connect some dots there, because he said, I'm so excited to be bringing health consciousness into my real estate business. And I'm like, how does one do that?
Yeah, bring those two things in alignment. Yeah, it's not simple.
It's not simple. No. Like, I feel like it would be easy to bring health consciousness into the world of functional medicine or as a medical doctor, because the medical profession is a lot less focused on health consciousness than it professes to be.
Yeah, and I don't think it's just for people of Christian faith. I think so many people in our industry have brought their values with them into this space. Right. So regardless of what your faith is, I mean, that's why I think in the coffee industry, we do talk about the Me Too movement here in a different way than in other industries. Right. We do talk about...
not enough, though.
Yeah, I agree. I think we're at the tip of that iceberg, but there's a welcoming mat for it in the sense. I mean, you go to RICO, you go to SCA, there's a platform for that. I'm coming out of an industry of restaurant owners, and when you go to the NRA, they're not talking about that at all. They separate those things. That's political.
NRA being the National Restaurant
Association. Not National Rifle Association, National Restaurant Association. But when you go there, that's not the conversation
Some people
we're
wouldn't
having.
have made that.
Yeah.
Like, what is he? Why the NRA? So with that, where do you think the industry is at with regards to those conversations about the hard stuff?
I'm not sure we're anywhere. I'm not sure that we have to be anywhere.
This goes back to your thing. Yeah. That was the point it was such a great foundation for this conversation when you were saying how conflict is a necessary part of cohesion, people coming together and solutions. Yeah. Because I wonder if we're not in that right now in our industry. I
think we are. I think there are some times when we overreach.
Tell me what you mean by that.
It's going to be really hard for an industry that still hasn't even defined its own borders of what specialty means to then take that and then say, within this system, this is how we make changes in the world. Because we're still trying to figure out who we are, let alone tell the world from our perspective as an industry what we should be doing or not doing. However, having said that, I also feel like the coffee shop is the perfect place for that conversation to happen. That's what I mean by I wanted it a place where people can come and sit down.
Almost like recreating what the genesis story of the cafe is.
So I don't see the coffee industry, and that might be my short-sightedness, but I don't see the coffee industry being able to go out into the larger hospitality world or business world or the world in general and say, this is what you need to be doing about the Me Too movement. This is what you need to be doing about people's self-identification and the gender identity. Yeah. I don't know that we have strong enough base for us to stand up and say something where other people will listen. That's just where we are as an industry.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So we can yell it, but number one, there's not a collective one single voice that's coming out because we don't have that here yet, and we don't necessarily want that, I don't think. Meaning people still want to hold on to different ideas and they don't feel like, for example, and I'm not putting this on SEA at all, they don't feel like an SEA needs to come out and have one statement that fits all. There's going to be different things, but what I think the coffee industry can do and cafes should be doing is to be the place where that conversation happens. Right? There was an organization called Days of Dialogue when the Black Korean conflicts were happening.
Okay.
And all they did was they brought people together into a safe place to have conversations.
They were the facilitators.
That they were facilitating conversation. They didn't have an agenda. They didn't try to take people from here to there or change minds or change this. It was just a place where people, and the reason they didn't do that is because they didn't know where to take people to.
You're right.
Because every time they said, hey, we want a perfect world looks like this, somebody would disagree with that. So, okay, how about that? No, we don't think that's perfect either. So somebody would always disagree what the ideal solution is. So what Days of Dialogue said is, you know what? It's the conversation that matters, not the end result. Because the end result will be the end result. So let's provide safe places where people have conversations. And I think the coffee shop is perfect for that. Not a place where you shout, not a place where you throw the middle finger and hold up banners, but a place where you actually, because real change, and I believe this with all my heart, real change doesn't happen because laws change. Real change happens when two people have a conversation and you change my heart.
That's why this platform exists. This is why I wanted to have.
Yeah, you can't make racism illegal in your heart. You can make it illegal on the books. You can make, sexism. You can make all these things illegal, but that doesn't change. Hate crimes didn't drop because we made it illegal. It just got defined because we made it illegal. But before that was going on, still going on. And so I know that for a fact that real change is on an individual basis. And if a coffee shop can be that, and I don't mean it has to be organized, but I mean it's a place where people can have a safe place to have the conversation. And I think our role in that change is to continually engender that. And
that's what I want to ask you. That role that you're talking about there. So if we say like here is the counter and on that side is the customer and this side is the industry. What role and where's the line where the industry gets to influence that conversation and where should we be holding back? And let me clarify that question because I see cafes that are opening up that are waving the LGBTQ plus, I want to make sure I say it properly, flag, and they're like, we only allow queer and people of color in here, or places that want to charge a man tax on. So if it's a voluntary man tax, but every single male customer that walks in is asked if they want to pay the man tax, and so you get other cafes in retaliation from that saying, well, I'm going to open a cafe that charges a woman tax. So I see that line between the counter, the industry and the public starts to blur when we're starting to present these opportunities. And I'm torn about whether I'm all for it or if I'm against it.
Yeah.
I think this conflicts that you were talking about that we're going through right now as an industry. Well, one of them, because there's many conflicts that our industry is experiencing right now. Is that par for the course of what we're trying to figure out that we are? Do you think?
So it's a really loaded question.
No, I didn't mean
in a good way. No, I don't mean loaded like you're trapping me. Loaded as in like this question is a broad question. So if you say that from a perspective of, hey, as an industry, what should we do? I don't believe as an industry we should do one thing at all. With the whole value of a coffee industry is how there's so many different tiers of coffees and the approach. If you're authentic about why you're putting, for example, a man tax on coffee, if you're authentic about that and you own that and you have a story behind it and you understand why it is doing and you're willing to do it at the risk of hurting your own business, more power to you. Go for it.
Right.
If you're telling me I have to do it as another coffee shop down the street, that I have to do what you're having to do, it's not only when I do it, it won't be authentic. It'll have a different meaning, and it's no different than somebody making me do something in terms of the way I treat my farmers or workers.
But you've also taken away my freedom in that situation.
Yeah. So if this is what you're about, more power to you. How can I support you? If I wanted to start a coffee shop with cats,
right, There's so many reasons that's wrong.
Right. Yeah. I come from food safety background, and
right. That's exactly where I go.
Animals in the coffee shop.
Not
and,
okay.
As part
No bueno.
No bueno, right? Like for me, that's like no. But I am not going to stand in the way of somebody who wants to try to make that happen, and are bringing customers in who are interested in that. But if they want to go to SCA and pass a rule that says in order to be considered specialty, you have to have a cat in your then I have a problem because you're trying to make it one note. I think there are certain things that we have to stand together as an industry for. So that's why I'm saying it's a loaded question. So on the other side of it, there are things that we should stand for as an industry. Equality. Man, even as I'm saying it, that list, like it's scary to.
It's very expensive, because there's
equality is a loaded question.
There's so many versions of equality.
Yeah, farmers' rights. I mean, there's so many things that I think we can take a look at and say, what are we about? But I think the strength comes in having a variety of voices that say we're trying these different things. And I have it here. There's now a lot of coffee shops, for example, that include gratuity into their bill. Right, so and that is automatically placed on there. You don't tip, but you're getting a service charge.
You do, but you don't.
Yeah. And I don't mind that.
Okay.
Like, go ahead and try that. And that's where you're coming from, and you have a reason for it, you have a belief behind it. I think it's going to come across well to your customers. You know your customers better than I do. You should understand what it is you're doing to them and then go process
and
that.
If it works, I want to have a conversation with you about
Yes.
it because it might, that's how we all grow.
Right.
Different people try different things.
But the moment we as a coffee shop, so I'm going to go on a little rant here, a little tangent.
Please do.
So I went to one of these coffee shows and we sat through several layers of topics during that 2 days. And as a coffee shop owner, I was told I have to be careful about the environment and my negative impact as a coffee shop on the environment. Straws, paper goods, usage of water, right? And I took that and it impacted me, and I said, yeah, I got to figure out something with that. Right?
Okay.
The next one I went and talked about, you got to pour back into your employees. Training, this many hours.
Oh, we're going to have a delicious conversation about this.
Having this, having that, making sure they have access to this, access to that, access to this. And I believe in that. I really, truly do. Yeah. So I wrote that down on a piece of paper. The next one I went to talked about the damage that's being done to coffee prices because commodity traders have dropped it so low. Yeah. Now farmers are losing money selling coffee, and the problems it's creating over there. And so we have to be willing to pay more as an industry. As a coffee shop owner, I don't know what that means. I don't know how to go to an importer and go, I want to pay more for the same coffee you're providing for me. Right. Can you make sure that money goes to the farmer? I know how that works, and it doesn't work like that.
No,
I can't.
Absolutely not.
So I'm paying what's on the market or what they've listed. I can choose who I work with.
You and I are going to have a discussion offline about this because I have an idea, and I just this second realized that you and I are the two people to deliver it.
Okay. So I added that onto my piece of paper, right? And then I actually was having a conversation in the foyer about somebody who's talking about giving back to the community. And I get 3 emails a day, kid you not, from schools, hospitals, nonprofit organizations, the Chamber of Commerce, asking for donated goods, asking for something.
I believe it.
And I'm a believer of those things. I'm a Boy Scout. My daughter's a Girl Scout. I mean, I believe in these organizations, so I want to support that. And so I put that down on my paper. And then I also realized, hey, this was early on in the year, so July was coming up, and July was when minimum wage goes up in Pasadena hugely.
This July coming up, right?
Yeah, this past July.
But next year is
another one.
The 2015.
Yeah.
It's $15 an
hour.
Yeah. It's next year, right?
Yeah, so depending on the city, it's going up, but eventually all the cities are going to get up to about 15.
Yeah, California's 15.
So I put that down on a piece of paper. And then I'm talking to my landlord about my lease and rent in Pasadena is coming up. And so I extended another 5 years and got an email saying, hey, this is your new rate. And the market rate went up in Old Town Pasadena, so you're going to have to pay more. Yeah. Or you can show yourself the door. So I put that down on a piece of paper. I ran through it. And if I do everything I want on that piece of paper, I might as well close today.
Go get a job for $300,000 somewhere else.
The math isn't there for all of that to be. So us as an industry saying to coffee shop owners and to anybody in coffee that you have to do all these things, it's not possible. It is if
Not
we
at
charge $10 a cup of coffee.
But we don't have that luxury.
But we don't have that luxury because we're not in a world where we have a vacuum and we can charge that. Because unless everybody in the coffee world is going to charge $10, it's not going to happen.
No, and we even can't if we say did, that because it's price fixing.
Not only is it price fixing, even if we did that, all it would do is cause people to go find a different source for caffeine.
Well, they're going to make it at home.
Yeah. So,
I mean, we can't win.
Yeah. So I really believe right now there's a compression happening to what's going on in the specialty world. Technology is getting better every year. Automated equipment is just on the rise, and you see everything from super automatics that do amazing jobs to milk foamers that create perfect milk without us having to have any skill behind it. So that stuff is happening here. Pricing on the commodity market is down right now, but it's going to skyrocket back up as soon as farmers starts closing up and planting other crops. So that's going to happen. And so you're going to start to see compression happen where we're being squeezed from both ends. And out of that squeezing and that conflict, we're going to see what fourth wave all of a sudden means. So
you think?
So I think fourth wave, for me, this is my personal opinion.
Uh-huh.
Fourth wave isn't going to be because somebody created a fourth wave. I think fourth wave is going to be caused by the market forces that are here.
Okay.
And so eventually I think some coffee shops will head towards a situation where they're looking at $20 cups of coffee. It's all geishas and 90 plus coffees and all each one handcrafted table side by someone who's 4 years in the industry. Yeah. So you're going to have group of coffee shops that lean towards that way.
Okay.
And then you're going to see another group of coffee shops that are going to start figuring out how to create less
$1 cups of coffee.
Yeah, be more approachable. I mean, almost everybody now has batch brew.
Right.
2 years ago,
well,
what are you doing?
You saw how hard it was in Sydney to get batch brew.
Yeah, you had to do one cup at a time, and now everybody's moving towards batch brew because there's just a reality to the cost of doing something like that, right? Equipment costs changing. So these forces are going to cause the industry to land somewhere to solve for this. And that, I believe, is going to be what fourth wave is. Not because someone said, I think we should do this as fourth wave and then move into that. I think the market forces are going to cause us to move into that, right? So it is just one of those situations where if we're not careful as an industry, those market forces will hook us into doing things that we're not necessarily proud of 10 years from now.
What do you mean by that?
There's an easy way to jump into some of these things and make a mistake doing it.
Mm-hmm.
So a great example of that is fair trade, direct trade.
Right.
I was really disappointed when I found out fair trade, direct trade didn't quite mean what I thought it meant.
No,
and
it really doesn't.
And it didn't get there because people's hearts were bad. It got there because that's what the market forces caused it to be. And so when SCA came out with a study that said, hey, we looked over several years of coffee buying and farmers' impact and found that there is no benefit for a coffee farmer to do specialty coffee because they don't make any more money than someone who's selling commodity coffee.
For anyone who's listening that doesn't understand what that means, it's that the cost of production is not being covered.
Yeah.
And the cost of doing business is not being covered.
Yeah.
Whether you're buying or selling commercial or buying or selling specialty grade.
Yeah.
Unless it's separate relationship buying.
Yeah.
But through fair trade and through these organizations.
Doesn't necessarily guarantee it. Sometimes it is. It doesn't mean it's not. And I don't have a problem with those people who are trying. I think it's admirable to try, but if you don't fully understand what's happening, that's what's happening. And, I've heard horror stories about farmers who are they're not deserving of our consideration in the sense that we're rewarding them for bad behavior.
Right.
Not all farmers are great. Some farmers use child labor, some farmers...
Slavery, sex trafficking, we've had so many people attest to that on this podcast.
So you have that happening on that level, and then, at the same time, we have this sort of key words and phrases we like to use in our marketing. We got to grow up.
Right.
Yeah, and I think that's what fourth wave is going to be. It's us growing up through this process of all the pressures and the changing technology and the changing understanding. We're going to have to one day determine what the definition of specialty is, and when that comes out at the other end of it, I think that's what fourth wave is going to look like. And I have no idea what it is.
It'll be interesting to see the way that we choose to evolve as an industry. And I don't know that it's going to be in one particular way, although given that there are a lot of people who like to just do what everybody else is doing and fall into that safety net, it's highly likely that 90% are going to go this way and 10% are going to go this way. And either the 90% get it right or the 10% get it right, and then the 90% jump onto.
Yeah.
I think, and I'd love to hear what you think about this. I think we're becoming saturated as an industry, and there's going to be a depopulation event. I think there's going to be something, whether it's that coffee becomes unaffordable for customers, or that coffee becomes so unprofitable that people have to close their businesses, or making coffee at home becomes so accessible that people are happy to deal with the isolation that they get. And I think technology plays a role in this. I think with things like, and I think that it's connected to VR. So bear with me with this. Technology and coffee are starting to find an interesting synergy, both from the perspective of automation and from the way that we run our lives with regards to augmented reality, the upcoming technologies with regards to virtual reality. And if you're someone like me who likes to keep an eye across, like, where are the trends going? Where is gaming going? I'm not a gamer. You and I were having a conversation about why I can't be a gamer. Yeah. I have an addiction problem with regards to that shit. But we're starting to get to a place where cafes need to find ways to increase their profit margins. Wages are going up. Employees are starting to shift in the way that they engage as a workforce. And I want to talk about that too. But we're also finding that culture is starting to shift in the way that it engages, and we want to create spaces where people can connect, right? But technology is driving it so that people can be more isolated, and people are wanting to spend more time engaging with people in other parts of the world.
So I actually think it's the flip side of that. I think because there's so many people, and I have to, because I'm in the industry and I want to see this industry grow, but because so many people are isolated, they need an outlet where they can.
I agree.
And I think coffee shops are a great place where that happens.
I totally agree.
Because you can come as you are.
But
you don't have to get dressed up, you don't have to do this, you don't have to do that. It's a place that comes easy for someone to come to, and all parts of the day, and the entrance fee, meaning $4 cup of coffee, is not too...
Right, and you can sit there and work, and you can connect with other people. So
I might walk into my coffee shop and see people with VR goggles, but I don't see... So my hope is that the coffee shops are that. The reason I say this is we've stood the test of time.
Right.
Coffee shops been around for hundreds of years in one form or another, whether it's a bunch of people sitting around a campfire... drinking to an official place where that's a tavern, and
community.
But community places, right? All the major revolutions and changes happen inside of a either a diner or a coffee shop or a tavern or something. That's where the root cause or the root meeting places where the conversation. So I don't think VR replaces that. I don't think.
I didn't until I listened to a conversation between Rogan and the guy who built the game Quake. He now works at Oculus Rift. And he was talking about where they're taking it.
I know where you're going with this, but I'll put it to you this way. A friend of mine who owns a business selling gaming equipment created a space where you can go rent time, right? So it's like an arcade in a way, but it's like an internet cafe where you go there. But all the gear there are equipped for ultimate gaming. Like, and all the games are loaded. You just go in and sign in, and you play your account, but through their
So it's
equipment.
Like VR technology.
Everything is there.
Okay,
yeah,
great.
It's the top of the line computers,
Don't
fastest
ever let
processing.
me go there.
He wanted to talk to me because he wanted me to teach him how to put a coffee shop inside that.
Yeah.
So, yes, I see where the gaming is, and I see how it causes people to be isolated. But there's a place even for that community where they need to connect with people, where they need to be surrounded by other people.
So here's the thing that shocked me. This has opened up my I've been associated with VR for about 10 years in trying to do some stuff with the music industry in VR. And this conversation that I heard the other day was really indicative of the way that people who are early adopters of the technology are engaging with it now. So the number one way that VR is used right now surprised the shit out of me. I'm sitting here in San Diego, my sister's sitting in Sydney, and we both want to watch a Netflix show together.
Oh, you can do it together.
You can do it through VR together.
Yeah.
That is how people are using VR. Or I can watch a show with my auntie in Syria.
So, I think we can move it to that conversation about Wi-Fi in a coffee shop.
Right.
So one day I'll give you two stories about Wi-Fi in a coffee shop. I was in my Pasadena location, and I was walking through, and I noticed that about 80% of the people inside had headphones on and a laptop open. And so as I was walking through and seeing that, the thing that kind of bothered me was, if one of my core values is to create a place where community happens, I got to turn the Wi-Fi off. Look at all these people.
I remember we had this conversation.
Yeah, and I was frustrated by that.
Yeah.
And then as I was picking up dishes, bussing some tables, I noticed one of them was actually talking to somebody on the camera. So I didn't know whether the platform was
Skype or
something
like that.
But they were actually having a conversation with somebody, and the other person had a coffee cup in front of them, and that's what caught my eye. And I thought, how fascinating.
Totally right.
So this other person is somewhere else in the world with a coffee in front of them. This person is in our coffee shop with a coffee in front of them, and they're connecting, and there's community there that I didn't intend.
It's like extended beyond
that. Yeah, it's
that.
extended beyond that. So at that point, it was kind of like, oh, that's actually a different way. And just because I'm not used to it, I grew up when cell phones were bricks and we carried beepers, so pagers. So
beepers
this is
too.
this is a huge jump up for me. So it made me realize, okay, community is being redefined, but it's still happening here, and that's why I'm okay with it, right? Like, oh, okay, not that everybody's on their Skype connecting to somebody far away, but the fact that people are working with somebody on a laptop, but they're happen to be here and the other person is somewhere else, that. Okay, I can see how that still plays a role.
But that's still the sort of augmented version of it's still the 2D kind of version of what we're talking about. I do see that at some point the cafe may shift from being in this world to being in the virtual world. So that, and when I was thinking of how we could use VR to become a part of the Elixir experience. We would get so many people say, God, I wish I could drink Elixir. God, I wish I could taste Elixir, blah, blah, blah. We wanted to have VR experiences created with our Elixir dealer stores, send people Elixir so that they can walk into a Copa Vida in the VR realm and sit down with somebody else and have an Elixir with them. And the elixir's in their hand in real life, and they're physically experiencing it, but they're sitting with their buddy who's in Rio de Janeiro, and they feel like they're having that together. That, I think, is a part of where the cafe experience is going. So that, and it's not just an Elixir thing, but that's just where I was kind of, my head was at a few years ago with regards to what role is VR and technology going to play. Like when we're talking fourth wave, fifth wave, sixth wave, this is a whole new scope of it. But I think that as an industry, this is something we really seriously need to start to consider, because it's coming.
No, and you're talking to the wrong person, because part of technology is kind of like over my head in terms of what I think is happening. I haven't even really thought about how that experience connects.
And it's just one part.
Like
technology is going to heavily influence.
And for me,
our industry.
I think it's going to be the things that are going to shape the coffee industry are going to be the basic forces that shape any other industry that we're in. Labor cost, cost of goods, cost of occupancy. Those are the three things that anybody in hospitality have to keep their eye on, and that's going to drive behavior. So I think technology that helps with any of those things, and I think what you're talking about with VR will affect the last component, the occupancy, right? So you can have a coffee shop the size of this room, but it feels like a 4,000 square foot space because
through
VR. And so I can see how some of those things will affect that piece of it. But I think for me, the initial impact of technology on coffee business is going to be in those two areas. Is going to be in how it affects labor, meaning I hope this is where I see it going.
Yeah.
That I think we're not too far away from $25 an hour for a barista.
I agree. I think we're going to have less baristas and
so what will happen is
workforce.
and so
and
you're
it needs to happen. In my opinion, it needs to happen.
Yeah, so we'll have less per location, and which means you need to have technology that allows for there to be less people on bar.
Is that
the problem though is
go ahead.
So many people in the coffee industry don't want that.
Why do you think that is?
Because it takes away from their craft. So
those people need to wake the fuck up.
Well, maybe, but I think I get where it's coming from. So if you look at welding, when welding was first discovered and utilized, it was a craft. In order to be a welder, you had to have an apprenticeship, and it took you years to make a clean, neat weld. Now it's all done by robots, and it cut out, I don't know how much of the car industries, that's a whole different, I mean, it used to be, if you could TIG weld, you were set for life. You were going to get a nice salary, work hours are going to be great, and you're going to work with your hands and go home and still make enough to send off kids to college. That's not the case anymore.
Well, the same thing's happening with sound engineers.
Yeah, so it's getting so much easier, right? I used to DJ too, so I can't stand it. I used to have to figure out how to transition from one song on LPs, and then these days now it's a button. Yeah.
Right. And do you see what I'm saying?
But here's my problem.
Yeah.
They sound better than I do.
Well, because they're more, not just more efficient, but they're more accurate.
Yeah.
And this is same thing with shoes.
Yeah.
We used to have cobblers.
Yeah.
And everyone revered the way that they worked.
Yeah.
And then we shifted to these mass-produced shoes, right? And they got more expensive, even though they were mass-produced.
Yeah.
And people complained that we don't want that to happen because you could have better shoes that were made to your feet, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, great. While you're having that debate, the rest of the fucking population is already buying the Nike Airs.
Yeah. Yeah.
They've already got on board the bandwagon and whatnot.
Yeah.
And this is, I hope that what we can do is help people embrace technology and where it's going and figure out where they should belong in that transition.
Because there is room.
There's so much room.
There is room. And there is room for, I think, folks, you can look at it from a manager perspective, learning more than just coffee, but understanding that there's a business to be run here and finding your future and growth and professionalism.
Become a coffee writer.
Yeah, and
get
that
involved
way.
in technology.
But I think even with let's say a super automatic comes into the play and it's making delicious coffee and everybody's running towards that, somebody still needs to dial in. A pallet is not going to get replaced. Sommeliers are still around, and the wine industry's been up-teched. How many sommeliers are still there? They still have these competitions where they go and they compare each other's tailor, but
it won't be a fake skill.
Yeah, I think that's where it's going to be.
Right.
If it's it's a very, very traditional, not traditional, but typical market issue, right? If the barrier to entry is low, and
you don't have.
I mean, I respect anybody who can make a cup of coffee with a perfect latte on top because I suck at it. But the barrier to that entry of learning how to do that isn't so high that it's going to keep everybody out. So we have these competitions, and we should, because there are people who are doing things with latte art that wasn't even dreamed of earlier, right? But it's not a situation where if you and I don't practice, we can get there. It'll take long.
It's not prohibitive.
Yeah, it's not prohibitive.
There's not money that's stopping you getting there. There's not a college degree that's stopping you getting there. Everyone's in an even playing field.
Exactly. I'm 5'7". I don't care how much I practice and how much I believe in myself. I'm never making the NBA. So I'm never gonna dunk. And
no. But that's a really legitimate.
Literally, one person I know has dunked at 5'7". His name is Bud Webb. Right, but literally, it's going to be prohibitive. The barrier to entry is really high, and that's what makes their job, professional athletes pay so high.
Yep.
Our barrier to entry is not that high. And so you have to find the pathway where your gifting and your talent and your skill set is something worth being valued, right? So
you have a point of difference,
right? I mean, if I was in a frame of mind of where I'm a barista and I wanted a barista, growth track, I'm looking at one of two things: either the management piece, because that's the hardest part of coffee shop, is managing the coffee shop, or developing my palate. We focus a lot on latte art competitions, but I think where the focus needs to be is in those Q graders and in those folks who actually have the palate to be able to taste something, make a difference, change,
and talk
about it, explain it to somebody else, and make the changes to either the roasting or the shot pulling or
the buying.
Yeah, so that the flavors that are coming are unique. That's who is going to, I think, have a long career in coffee. People who are going towards the business side of things, or people who are going towards the actual gateholders, if you will, or people who are making the buying decisions because their palate is developed in such a way, right? Which isn't for everybody. I mean, we all have different number of taste receptors in our mouths. So some of us can and can't, right? And some of us are good at tasting something and explaining it to somebody else, and some of us are not so good at that, right?
And some people can taste it all, but don't know how to articulate any of what they're saying.
I don't know how many times I've been at a cupping session when somebody goes, "Oh, stone fruit." Which stone fruit? Plum, peach. I mean, they're all stone fruits. They all taste different.
and that's the vocabulary that person has.
Yeah.
And what I'm trying to encourage people to do is, especially I mentor 6 baristas, or 6 coffee professionals. They're not all baristas. And the thing that I'm harping at them constantly is, you can't, if you want to be long-term successful, and I'm talking 10, 20 years successful in this industry, you cannot approach this long-term success with a current day mindset.
Yeah.
Because this current day mindset is already changing so quickly because of the way technology is influencing our industry, and social media is influencing the way that we engage and interact with each other.
Yeah.
Having a current day mindset for a career that's going to happen in 10 or 20 years, I think is a mistake. I have one of the professionals that I mentor. We started working together 2 months ago, and her dream is to be a coffee trainer and have a training school. And so when we were having the discussion, and she's awesome. She's a brand new mum. She's got a 2-year-old. To me, that means brand new. I know that feels a lifetime for the person having the child, but she's got a 2-year-old. She wasn't anticipating having a child. And so, but her and her husband fell pregnant. She loves the coffee industry. She loves teaching people, and she's in a great job, but she wants to work for herself. And in 10 years, when her map gets to 10 years, her career map, she wants to have her own coffee
shop.
No, school.
Oh, great.
She wants to have her own coffee training center.
That's awesome.
Right. It's very exciting. But when we talk about what that looks like, so it's got a bunch of different types of coffee machines. It's got a Seneso and a La Marzocco, and it's got a decent espresso machine, and you can learn how to go and steam milk, and she teaches all of these things. And then I said to her, but hold on, you won't need to learn how to pull an espresso shot in 10 years from now.
Maybe.
You can.
Yeah.
But the majority of people are going to have automated machines by that time.
Yeah.
And she then, that was an eye-opening moment for her, and that, oh shit, I never considered where technology is going to take training.
Yeah.
What are we going to be training people about? And so then I push it off to her, like, what do you think you should, what are we going to be teaching people about in 10 years from now? If the robots are doing everything, if the machines are automated, what's the things we need to teach people about?
Yeah.
And I think training is heading in the direction that you were saying.
Yeah.
Teaching people how to taste, teaching people how to describe the experience of what is it. And Matt Perger calls it a coffee concierge.
Yeah. And I think that's a great name for it, or a sommelier is another way to put it.
Same.
I mean, when I go to a nice restaurant that actually has a sommelier, I love bringing them over, even if I'm just buying a glass and not a bottle, because they can explain things to you in a way that makes that whole process of tasting that wine completely more enjoyable.
You know I don't drink. I was in Mexico doing a consulting gig, and Jethro, shout out to Jethro, he took me...
Great guy.
Yeah. He took Elliot and I, because Elliot was there with me on the consulting gig. He took us out to dinner, and there was a young woman there. She reminded me so much of me when I started out in coffee. And she was talking about this orange wine, and I'd never heard about orange wine. I haven't drunk for 15 years. And she was talking to them about this amazing natural orange wine. And I asked her for a glass.
She convinced you.
She wasn't even talking to me. She was talking to them because they love wine. And she just looked at me and she said, "Do you want to try some?" And I said, "Yes, please." The way that she spoke about the wine and understood the wine, it enticed me, someone who doesn't drink.
So that's why I don't think technology is ever going to surpass the human race to the point where those kinds of authentic moments that involve food and wine and beverage and aren't going to go away. I truly believe that is one of the still basic things that we as the human race need in connection with one another. We need a place where I can see you eye to eye and be able to have a conversation, but have somebody talk to me about what this is and what that is and why this is important. My favorite restaurant experiences aren't the expensive ones. Some of them are expensive, but most of them are, it's like walking into whatever the dollar sign is, but it being perfect for the context of what you're doing.
What was that restaurant we went to the night of the election? That Korean restaurant. Remember, it was you and Abe. Shout out to Abe. Gosh.
Yeah.
We went.
I don't remember.
Do you remember that night?
Yeah,
we'll never forget that.
No.
The rest of our fucking lives.
That was really weird. That was really funny. That was an experience.
That was, and the bar that we went, the Republican bar that we went to afterwards to watch the debate.
You know, that's why I think it was really interesting, because we have one perspective politically. We're sitting in a context, and that was a cigar lounge that we were at.
That was a cigar lounge, but every TV
was
on
Fox.
And you politely asked if we could have just one TV on CNN,
please. But what was really interesting to me as I was watching that is I actually learned a lot from that process. Because I walked into that election thinking, of course not. Of course not. And the thing is, maybe it's because I've been trained as a mediator. It didn't make me go, I'm freaking pissed. I wasn't happy. But
we've got work to do.
Yeah, but it gave me that sense of, wow, there's a lot of people in this country whose experience of this country is very different than mine. And there's something about missing them, because we kept on hearing that again and again. It's the flyover states. It's the flyover states. It's the flyover states.
What does that mean?
It's the states that are so in
the middle of the country?
Not only in the middle of the country, but they're not considered important as some of the coastal states. Like California has a huge economy. New York has a huge, Florida, and so these states
we fly
over them, okay, right? So that's where the term comes from. But the analysts were talking about it. They didn't account for the flyover states. And it just made me think. The world we live in, the America I live in, is a lot bigger than LA County, San Diego County, and the one end of 5 freeway to the other. It's actually there's things that I don't understand, right?
Did it shock you?
It did, and then I had a trip where this was funny. I'll tell you the whole story.
Yeah, please do.
I was flying over, and on the way flying over into Chicago, and then I had a meeting in Indiana. Flying over into
Indiana's
Chicago.
Where?
Indiana is south of Illinois.
On the East Coast.
So Chicago, Indiana,
I'm still
Illinois. Yeah, and then Indiana is down here. And so flew into Chicago, which was the closest airport, and then I drove down. On the way there, I'm on the plane and I'm watching Crazy Rich Asians on TV.
I loved that
great movie. But this lifestyle of these people who would and everybody's driving a Bugatti and everybody's driving a Lamborghini, crazy. I'm like, who are these people? I want to meet these Asians.
You want to be that Asian?
Yeah. But I watched that flying in, and then next day I got up in the morning and drove 2.5 hours into Indiana, and I drove into this town that was literally shut down by 6 p.m. There was only 2 open restaurants. One was a Burger King, the other one was a diner.
No way.
And the town was so small in terms of the size of it that you can run full out from one end of to the other. And I can't run very long anymore, but I could run full out from one end to the other of the main central area.
Wow.
It's that small. They had 1 or 2 working, lights and everything with stop signs. And I'm talking to the people who work there, and one of the things the reason they set up their coffee business there was because they're trying to provide jobs and opportunities for people who live there, because the opioid epidemic has decimated that city. Young people are messed up, and the ones that are able to do more and have opportunities have all left. They've all moved on to majors.
Well, they wanted to get the fuck away from that.
Exactly.
It was terrible.
And when I saw what was happening there, I understood.
Really?
Yeah, I understood.
Because I hear about it a lot, but I don't think that I can get a reference point for it.
I understand why they want to see change.
Yeah.
I understand why, and wherever my politics are and wherever your politics are, and we know each other's politics, and I'm not trying to toe the middle line here, but I think the dangerous thing, whether it's in coffee or anything else, is when you think you have all the answers and the other side is completely wrong. That's never a good place.
No.
Yeah.
And I think
human beings all have a right to have an opinion and all those things, for sure. And there are times when people are just wrong, and that's reality too.
Well, that's white supremacy.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
I also like to have conversations with those people.
Yeah, so the extremes are always the extremes.
Flat earthers.
Yeah.
Another great example.
Yeah. So
because people like you and I love conversation, right? But people like you and I are also curious to understand is there something that I'm missing?
Sure.
So I remember when flat earthers, and I do the same thing with the white supremacists.
We're so far off coffee. This is hilarious.
That's the great thing about this podcast. It's just a conversation. It's this idea that, all right, I'm a trained scientist.
Yeah.
I have been taught that the earth is round.
Yeah.
Every human I've ever encountered in my life has led me to believe that this is a correct summation.
Yeah.
But do these people have information that I don't have?
Yeah.
Well, no, they're just fucking crazy.
Yeah.
But I needed to know that before I made that understanding. Yeah. Open-mindedness is a huge thing to me. It's important. Yeah. But same thing with white supremacists. Yeah. Same thing with Antifa, which is
the other side
of that. And I'm really concerned about us going and having SCA in Portland next year because of what Antifa's been doing. But I want to understand the extremes so that I can see if there's any... I want to know the genesis of what led to that.
Yeah. And I think the majority of us sit in the middle somewhere.
I consider myself a centrist.
Yeah, and I am too. But, and again, for me, I'm going to bring it back to coffee in this way. This is why there needs to be a place where people can sit and have conversation without having to be on the street to make a point or do violence to make a point.
Right.
But a place where we could actually, because I think that's where real change happens. It happens one conversation at a time. Somebody who I trust and respect telling me something that I didn't think about before, and that small conversation leads to a train of thought that gets me to something else, right? And I just love that about coffee shops. That it's a place where people can come and do that. And that's where our focus should be as coffee shop owners, not just on the product, not just on the barista. Our coffee shops have been broken down into people, process, and product. Yeah, please. So everything falls along one of those 3 categories of focus. And one of the things we've learned is that...
some sparkling elixir.
Thank you. When we talk about people, depending on who you talk to, it means different things. So when we say we focus on people, a lot of our team members thought that meant it was about them and just them.
Right.
So, for example, I told you our company's values are approachable, welcoming, community-minded, transparent, and authentic in what we do. And what was really interesting was a holiday would come up. oh, I can't work this holiday.
Right.
Oh, but it's your shift, and there's nobody else to take your shift. We really need you to be here. Well, that's not a community. That's not approachable to me. Okay, no. And so I was like taken aback the first time I heard it, and my reaction was, no. That you don't understand. We are supposed to provide approachability for somebody else. The reason we open on Thanksgiving is that we have a bunch of students who come to our coffee shop, and if we weren't open,
from their family,
yeah, they would be sitting home. So I wanted to be open half day and allow them to come, and we sometimes do a turkey meal. But the idea was, well, it's a place where they can. But they saw it the other way. I have to work Thanksgiving. That's not very.
That doesn't work for me.
That doesn't work
for me. How do you approach that?
Yeah, and so. In the beginning, I was just upset. I was like, no, you don't get it. This is your job.
Because we come from a different perspective of the workforce, right?
Yeah,
you and I will do whatever it takes to get the job done.
But the reality is, if they can't see how those things apply to themselves, then I haven't done a good enough job explaining what those things are.
At what point? At interview? At orientation?
Okay. Yeah. So I built my company around a mission statement, a vision statement, and core values. And on top of that, I figure out what my marketplace is. On top of that, I figure out what the product and service I'm bringing to them.
Right.
On top of that, I figure out what the resources I have to bring that product to that marketplace. On top of that, here's the systems I create to manage this process of bringing resource to the product, to the marketplace.
It's that ship steerer.
Yeah, and then on top of that is developing a management team that allows me to grow this out this way. And then on top of that is corporate culture or company culture. The thing about that is that it's not like a statement you can say, and I did think that earlier on. I had a great statement, that's our culture, we're going to live up to it and try to live by it. It turns out those words, what coffee shop owner goes, I want to be money hungry. I want to be just about becoming famous. Nobody says that.
No.
Everybody talks about community, but what does it actually mean?
Yeah,
right?
How does it translate as a KPI?
Yeah, and then everybody has to kind of live that out or it actually disappears.
Yeah.
It fizzes away because it's meaningless words. I once visited a 55-year-old oven manufacturing company in Ohio for my previous job, and they make these gigantic ovens. And I was walking down the hallway, and they had this beautiful poster up with the company core values up there.
Okay.
And I was walking with the VP of sales. And so we're walking in, I looked up and I said, hey, that's a great place for the core values. You guys have some amazing core values. And he looked at me and goes, oh, I didn't even know that was there.
Yeah.
Well, that's what that is.
Yeah.
He was the VP.
Yeah.
He had no idea so after 50 something years of operating, those core values don't mean...
They meant nothing.
It's gone, right? Like it dissipated. So I think that's what happens with a lot of values. So now I have team members who have told me that our values don't sing to them because they're applying it to themselves and not necessarily to the customers. I've done two things wrong. One is I haven't talked to them enough to have them understand that these values are about what we aspire to provide for our customers.
Right.
So I have to do a better job of explaining that. But the other thing is, if it doesn't sink to them and they don't feel like they are experiencing that as team members, well, then there's something wrong with that too.
So perhaps there's a misalignment in the people that you're hiring?
So I have to rethink that process of who it is that we're bringing on to our team. Not everybody's meant to work at Copa Vida, and I know that.
That's a big one.
We're not for everybody. As customers, we're not for everybody. Some people are not going to like our product, and I have to be okay with that. And they're free to write the Yelp review they want to write and say what they need to say, and that's
every business.
That's every business. Yeah. We're for a very specific group of people, and I think we've looked at over this past 6 years if there's any growth that we've done. It's realizing that it's okay.
But here's the thing. Like for anyone that's listening to this conversation that's wondering like, oh, but shouldn't you be for everybody? No, every single business should be for a very specific group of people.
Yeah.
And that very specific group of people can differ in size.
Yeah.
Like there can be lots of people in that specific group of people, but it should be for a specific group of people. One
of my favorite restaurants is this small restaurant in LA. They have like 10 chairs.
What's it called?
It's so favorite, I forgot the name of it.
Where is it?
It's in LA near Koreatown.
Is it?
Chef Menes has, he
used to be in Elixir.
Yeah. And
Le Comptoir.
That's it, Le Comptoir.
Le Comptoir.
Yeah, that's why I can't remember because I can't pronounce it.
Le Comptoir,
Yeah.
Gary Menez, it's
Yeah.
an omakase restaurant.
Yeah.
And
from a business perspective, you look at that and go, you need 20 more seats in here. You could fit, people would line up. But then he would have to have other people make the food. He makes it himself.
Not only that, he grows the vegetables himself.
I know. So he can't do this. So his values are those
I've got to get him on the podcast.
Yeah. And because his values are those, he's willing to live up to it and take his margin where he can and say, this is what success means to me.
Yeah.
I respect that so much because he hit what he's aimed at, and he's not sitting there going, I need to have 20 people out the door and I need to have 10 new locations. That's not his goal.
No.
And
he's got little kids as well.
Yeah.
He wants to spend time with his kids.
Yeah.
He wants to take them to school every day, bring them home.
Yeah.
And these are the things that are markers of success.
So he's not going to be on the front page of Forbes magazine. He's not going to be on the front page of whatever popular travel magazines there are, because he's not going to have that kind of footprint. But he's okay with that, and not only that, he's able to truly say every dish that comes out of here has got my...
But he's still considered fine dining.
Yes.
And he gets written up in Eater. All the time. And people are lining up to go to his restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
But he has been the celebrity chef. He and Gary... Voltaggio.
Yeah.
What's his first name again? Michael. God, shit, he's going to get really upset at me forgetting his first name. I'm sorry if you ever hear this, Michael. But Michael Voltaggio and Gary came up at the same time. Mm-hmm. And Michael went into superstardom. Yeah. And Gary decided that he was going to have kids, and he's a celebrity chef, but being a super celebrity chef just wasn't something that he wanted to do because family was going to be important. He's got this great omakase restaurant in downtown. But the important part of that example is that he's found his niche. He knows his lane. Yeah. He's growing his own vegetables. Yeah. Any of the fish that he serves there, or any of the cuts of meat that he served there, he handpicks. Yeah,
and he butchers himself. Yeah,
and his sourdough starter is 21 years old. Yep. He made it himself. Yeah. And he's very proud of it. He can tell you every single thing that goes into the slicing of every... And he has 2 staff. He has a sous chef and a dishwasher. Yeah.
So there's a man who understands what his
product is.
Yeah, what his product is, what his service is, and he's very clear about what that connection is. Is it scalable? Probably not. Does he want that scale?
Probably
Definitely not. I don't think he's going, I need to figure out a way to open 10 more units.
He could have had that.
He could have. He chose away from that.
If Gary wanted to get VC money, there's nothing stopping him from opening that all over Asia.
So that's why I think as coffee shop owners, we look into it, when you ask what the niche is, and when you're asking yourself, what business am I in? I think that's a critical answer. Did you get into it so that you can meet people? Did you get into it because you're about the coffee? Then you can't hire a bunch of people to make the coffee for you. You got to be on the bar, and you got to love the coffee, and you got to charge accordingly. So it if you go to that restaurant and he charges what he charges, no one's complaining about.
No, Gary doesn't have problems putting seats on, and it's not cheap. Like
you're
not walking out of there paying less than $200.
Yeah, and so
that's without wine.
Yeah, and that's a very different experience than someone who's going to get some, a Cheesecake Factory with an hour wait.
Right.
And is one bigger success than the other?
But they know their audience as well.
Yeah, they do.
And that's
They're
what I'm saying.
So
they know their audience. Yeah. Starbucks knows its audience.
Yeah, there's a
Dunkin'
place for all that.
Dunkin' Donuts knows its audience. 7-Eleven knows its audience. And look, 7-Eleven is, especially in Australia right now, they're snagging a lot of the specialty coffee people. Yeah. For $1 coffees, 99-cent coffees.
Compression. Bottom's coming up, top's coming down.
Absolutely
We're going to get squeezed, and out of that squeeze is going to be whatever comes out of fourth wave is going to be that. Yeah.
I wonder, again, like going back to technology, I think that's where we're starting to see it. You get the, not to mention any brands in particular, but just because I've been exposed to it the most, and they are not a sponsor of this podcast, Eversys, the brand that Matt's working with. You've been testing some of their stuff, haven't you?
Yeah. So I see it as a perfect solution to wholesale clients who are running offices, tech campuses where they need a coffee service, but they don't have enough business there for that to justify a full-time barista. And what barista wants to work in a office where you get, at the most 50 customers a day? It's going to be very difficult, right?
Yeah.
And so this super automatic where somebody can self-serve themselves into making a decent cup of coffee.
And it's self-cleaning.
It's self-cleaning.
All of it.
Yeah. So, but it still needs to be dialed in. Someone still needs to go in there occasionally and say, this is how the coffee should be ground. This is how...
But that's where it's approachable for you to be able to do that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like you can have a salesperson that's trained in that.
Yeah.
That can go in once, however much is required and do that.
And every time the coffee changes from this blend to that blend, or, this crop to that crop, go in there and redial everything in and, make sure everything's clean and working, drop in cleaning tablets and off you go. I mean, the thing is brilliant. And I have baristas who will kick that machine's butt any day of the week, but not all my baristas.
But does that matter?
No.
But does that matter? Like, and this is where I
exactly So for what you're getting, what goes into that machine, I think it's brilliant what they've done.
And especially because 3% of customers give any fucks of how high the coffee scored.
No.
Or can tell.
Yeah.
Like most of the customers
can tell. I think that's more. There's more truth to that. That the reason why I think the idea of just raising prices on coffee falls short for me is there's a very small group of people who can actually tell the difference. So I put it this way. I love a good glass of wine.
Mm-hmm.
And I can tell the difference between a $2 chuck you get at Trader Joe's and a $100 bottle of Camus.
Okay.
I can tell the difference. I can tell you why it's worth $100 or, $98 more. I can tell you why I would pay for a bottle of Prisoner at $38, $40 over a $2 chuck. But if you were to give me $1,000 Bordeaux, you just wasted $900 because I don't know the difference between a $100 bottle of Camus and a $1,000 bottle of Bordeaux. I'm not I don't have like collection of wine or anything like that. I buy one at a time, finish it, and then buy the next one.
Right. Maybe sometime later as well.
Yeah, and it sometimes takes me a little bit. Yeah. But I enjoy enough of it, and I think that's most people in coffee. They can tell you the difference between the coffee you're making at a specialty coffee shop and something you buy at Starbucks, Coffee Bean, Tea Leaf, or one of these second wave coffee shops. But from specialty shop to specialty shop,
I don't think they can.
I don't think most people can tell the difference. What they hone in on is how you serve them, the surroundings and the ambiance of the space, and that determines what they think the value of that cup is, right?
Oh yeah.
And this isn't to put anybody down, because I've walked into my own shop and had horrible shots and horrible pour-overs and said to myself, the heck am I doing, and who just made that, and let me talk to them and figure this out, because some of this wasn't good on day in and day out. And obviously I'm having like 4 cups a day, so do the numbers. The percentage is low, but it still happens. I've walked into Blue Bottle and said, the hell is this? And then I've walked into shops I've never heard of and gone, this is a God shot, and this is amazing. Totally. And so but does everybody get that? When
most people are drinking cappuccinos with 2 sugars.
To go back to our first part of the conversation, when my 8-year-old daughter said, "Is this 100% Arabica?" I have no idea what she's asking. She's mimicking, and and I'm not saying our customers are that dumb, but I'm saying most people haven't been given the opportunity to learn the difference between these things. Yeah.
And when you reference...
And by the way, it doesn't make them less important of a customer to you because of that. Yeah.
If their reference point is a caramel latte, they can tell the difference between a caramel latte at Copa Vida versus at Starbucks versus at Tim Windlebow versus, caramel latte...
I don't make a caramel... I'm just kidding.
You're one of those baristas. The approach that I like to take with regards to this idea is... your coffee can be 70% there. Yeah. Your customer service has to be 120%.
Yeah. Yeah. I can make a bad cup of coffee, but if I provide that in a way that's authentic, meaningful, and actually humanly engaging, then that person will give me a second chance, a third chance, a fourth chance. My favorite story is one of our very first regulars. First day she walked in, she's from Australia, by the way, so she's one of your
one people. Of my countrymen.
Yeah. She walked in, she got a latte, and she brought it right back after one sip. This was like within second week of being open.
Sorry.
And she goes,
Aussies will do that.
You know, she puts it right down, like, that's the wrong temperature. That's not good.
Shit, I'm
this
sorry.
isn't, no. And so we could have said, fine, you're not our customer. Go ahead and go back to wherever coffee shop you came to.
Coffee Land.
Yeah, whatever. But instead, Frank, I don't remember whether it was Frank or Sam, because at that point we were all behind the bar. But one of them said, hey, how can we make it better for you? What are you looking for? Oh, and so she explained she needed more foam, more dry foam. And so things like, so we're doing like a North American latte. I think you're looking for something more European. Let me try something and then see if you like it. So he went back behind the bar and made it, gave it to her. She loved it. Yeah. And I can tell you, if I tried that coffee, I would have hated it.
Right.
But she loved it. And then that became her drink. So every time she comes in, we trained our baristas to say, when she comes in and asks for a latte, just make it extra hot. We're just making it extra hot. Don't worry about what our parameters are. This is for her. We're making it extra hot. At one point, and she still does come in this often. She's gotten less frequent with her age, but she was a retiree. At one point, she was coming in twice a day.
Yeah, wow.
In the morning to get
That's
coffee.
That's a very Australian thing, right?
Yeah, in the morning to get coffee and read. She'd go home and then come back in the afternoon around lunchtime with a friend and order a full meal. That single engagement of, you know, us saying, what do you want, versus saying, no, we are dialed in here, this is our product, made an impact on her enough for her to engage. We know her. I've met every single one of her kids.
Yeah, wow.
Her husband. We've had amazing conversations about Australia and travel. She loves to travel, and I know about her health, what she's going through, what surgery she had to have. We're friends. It's a community, and that part has to be part of your product. So when I say we're community minded, it's not that I am out there talking about #MeToo movement. Not that there's anything wrong with that. And no, there isn't. But you know what I mean?
I love
like,
that we have to qualify that now.
And I don't say that defensively, but it's because the word community is so loaded and so broad.
I'm
so
always saying to people, what the fuck do you mean about? Everyone's like got this thing. Oh, we want to create a place of community.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
Right. So I have to qualify it every single time.
Yeah.
It was the same mistake I made with our employees, saying we're an approachable company, but saying no to taking the day off on Thanksgiving and having somebody else take their place, which was the part that I had a problem with. You're fine with you taking off, but somebody else has to take your place.
Right.
Okay. That's a little selfish, but if you're saying we need to close, that's something we can't do because our customers need service too, and a lot of these students don't have a place to go. So we have to define what that is. And so I keep qualifying things like community. I have to define and qualify what authenticity is. And I don't think that's a job you do once. I think it's a continual thing.
It's an ongoing process.
Yeah.
I mean, I found that look, Elixir was the first physical product business I'd ever had. And I was utterly shocked by what it took to create and build and grow and cultivate it to where it is so far.
Yeah.
But the one thing that surprised me more than anything is how much I have to keep redefining everything.
Yeah. For me, when I look at all the people I look up to in the coffee world, I don't agree with half of them.
Yeah,
half of them I don't even like personally. I wouldn't want to go out drinking with them, for example.
Yeah.
But I look up to them because these are people who don't stop asking what more, what next. Right. These are people who are not done. Like they're not, they're
That's
10 years
exciting,
in.
isn't
Yeah,
it?
they're 15 years in, they're 20 years in. They're not done. They're not resting on their laurels and saying, because I did this one time and I won this trophy one time, I'm done. They're constantly having to re-engage, and it's not like the same thing. They're not going, I made great coffee latte art last week, so I'm going to make better latte art. They're moving on to different aspects of this, right? They're now moved on to seeing, what cold brew extract is going to do. They're moved on to seeing, hey, how do we bring TDS measurements into a thing where it's a real tool and not just a piece of equipment we use once in a while to make ourselves feel better. By the way, I haven't figured that out. And
do you know GB
those
Little?
kind of thing.
Have you heard of GB Little?
Mm-mm.
Okay, I have to introduce the two of you.
Okay.
So GB is a great example of what you're talking about. GB was just the Australian champion for latte art.
Ah, okay.
Right? GB tried for 7 years to become the Australian champion in latte art. was regional champion most of those times.
Yeah.
But in the process of trying that, she tried to become Brewers Cup champion. She tried to become roasting champion. She tried to become like every kind of champion, barista champion. And you know what? Got there. So she was on this podcast talking about it. She would say, I tried latte art, I got really good at it and enjoyed it, but then I realized I conquered it. And I could keep trying to conquer it so I could keep moving up to become world latte art champion. But there's this other part of it, which is Brewers Cup. And I need to understand that so I can get better at tasting. So I can get better at brewing. So I'm going to... And she showed up to that competition in the finals. And they said to her, no, Jibby, you're in the wrong place.
Go back to the latte section.
And so the next year, though, she's like, well, I learned how to compete. Now I need to learn how to judge. Well, she turned up to that and they told her the same thing. Jibby, this is not where the latte art judges should be. You have to go back and judge. That's where the latte. And so it was so foreign to the people around her that she would try and conquer her knowledge and understanding of so many. And competition is the way that she does that.
And I love that coffee people have... I've met a lot of coffee people who are pushing themselves in all these other areas. Right. What I wish they would add to their goal, thank you very much, their sort of repertoire of things that they're picking up, is also understanding what it means to be a coffee shop owner and an entrepreneur. That has to be part of the craft. If you're going to have a long-term profession in coffee, you have to understand the business aspect of it. And I really I can't emphasize this more. It's a craft. Business is a craft as much as coffee brewing, roasting, all of that. There's no answer. There's no one, and you can't buy a book, Dummy's Guide for Running a Coffee Shop, and then you have a successful coffee shop. There's no such thing. It's try, adjust, try again, adjust, try again, adjust, and try again. Just like making a cup of coffee.
It's truly a creative endeavor.
It is. And I wish more would embrace that, because I think when more people get involved in that aspect of it, understanding what it means to be in the coffee profession, is that it isn't just about making a product, but it's also about selling the product, operating, logistics, all of that. I mean, without coffee importers, there's no specialty coffee.
Yeah, and avoiding the parts of it that you don't like.
Yeah.
Like I hate and suck at sales, but I can't avoid it.
No.
Avoiding the parts of the industry that you don't like. And correct me if I'm wrong here. You're not saying that everyone has to own a business, but everyone needs to understand what that craft is.
If you want to make yourself completely
proof from destruction.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you want to make yourself part of that team, coffee shop team,
a well-rounded professional.
Yeah, then you have to be able to understand the concerns of those people who are also owning and running it, because if that doesn't happen, there's no coffee shop, right? So you have to understand what makes them tick. You have to understand what's important to them as much as they have to understand what why you're in the business as well, right?
Oh,
so
100%.
And I think that's sometimes where I have the biggest struggle as a coffee shop owner, and I'll separate myself. I'll never identify myself as a barista. That's not me. I've tried, I've failed. As a barista, I'm a failure. Right. And I'm okay with being a failure. As I said, I realize my forte is in creating cafes. It's not in creating
behind the bar.
So I got great partners who are
You know how to feel the game.
Yeah,
that's why you're so good at that.
Yeah.
As a business owner, is because you recognize that your role is the conductor.
Yeah, and not
and you have to go find the musicians for the orchestra.
Absolutely, but I still have to understand what they're doing.
Yeah.
But they have to understand what I'm doing too, and that sometimes isn't there. And I think it's really interesting because so many, especially young new baristas, want coffee shop owners to invest into them, which is fine. I don't have a problem with that, but they don't necessarily invest into the business. They're free agents, and they want to stay free agents. Like, well, I want to, have the opportunity to go try here, go try there, see this and see that, and I want to learn the coffee industry. I've heard that a lot.
Yeah.
So I went over here because they're better at espresso. I went over there because they're really good with this, and I went over there and I'm trying to learn so that I can have one day my own coffee shop. You know what's the best way to one day have your own coffee shop?
How?
Have a coffee shop. Because there's no way to...
There's nothing that's going to prepare you for the onslaught of clusterfuckery that's involved in all of it. I mean, it's the only way I know how to put it. Because, only because if anyone had have said to you that this is what was going to be involved in owning cafes, would you have done it?
No.
No.
And even if I could get myself to do it, and even if I knew that,
you still couldn't understand the pain points.
Yeah, I still wouldn't.
No way. I say that to everybody. Like, honestly,
every single one of my managers have at one point shoveled crap. Yeah. Because the bathroom was flooded. Or because,
And that's not even the most devastating parts of it. Like, having to deal with humans is very difficult.
Yeah.
Having to, and this is why I think that we're at a very interesting, to bring it back to that conflict thing, right? We're at a very interesting time in the evolution of our industry, in the sense that if we don't find cohesion between the workforce and business owners soon, business owners are going to say, this is too fucking hard, I'm going to automate.
Yeah.
Because it's just so hard to deal with the employee issues.
Yeah.
And we want to have staff that do great things. We want to employ people. But I've got to tell you, like, and I can talk about this next week when this is finally settled and everything has been sorted, but I've just been through a situation legally that I've told you all about.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just, it's brutal to have to go through the anxiety of dealing with other people's very fragile egos.
Sure.
That if they were being reasonable,
but
not even fair, but just reasonable.
Yeah.
But this is what we
this is what we signed up for.
That's right. That's
so
what we signed up for.
You can't cry about it.
No, totally. But what I'm saying is that if this happens enough,
it drives away.
And then someone presents you, Eversys shows up and says, hey, listen, my machine can turn your workforce from 5 to 1.
Yeah.
Well, guess what I'm going to do?
Yeah.
And that's where people need to be understanding that, listen, I get it. We signed on to carry all the risks.
Sure.
But you have to understand that if you're not going to show up to engage, I don't need you to meet me halfway. I don't need you to be anywhere near as invested as I am in my business. But I need you to be invested 600% in your own career. And if you're going to show up to do this job, and I'm going to pay you a better than fair wage to do that, I expect you to live up to your word.
Sure. And I think, business owners have to do that for themselves too.
I agree.
Yeah, they have to go, hey, when I'm coming into this, these are the risks I'm taking. These are the things that I have to worry about. These are the challenges I'm willing to take on. And one of them is dealing with employees or team members.
And that was my naivety.
Yeah.
I expected people to show up for themselves. And in all honesty, Steve, like, you've seen me go through a number of challenges with regards to this stuff. You've been through challenges with regards to this stuff. And I finally realized, I kept saying to you, I don't know what's wrong with me. What is it about me that makes people treat me this way? You've heard me say that so many times. And I came to realize it's not necessarily that there's something wrong with me. It's not that there's something wrong with them. It's my mindset. I was just naive to the idea that, look, my parents raised me to give 600% in everything that I do.
Yeah.
And I relate to people who show up for themselves.
Yeah.
I anticipated that that's how everybody was, because everybody I grew up around was like that.
Sure.
And since I was a kid, I gave 600% of everything that I did. My naivety didn't open me up to the idea that other people don't. And I know that sounds ridiculous.
No, it doesn't.
It does.
And I would challenge you with this, though, as you're saying that. The thing that I would add to that is, did you bring the right person on? And if you did, for whatever reason you decided there's something about them that was great, that you liked. And if that was the case, did you provide a situation where they can make that connection with you? So what I found is that for a lot of people who are coming into our company, there's a dating period. Before they'll come into you as a company and say, I'm in with you, there's a dating period where they're processing whether this is the company I want to be in. So you have an opportunity at that time to make enough of an impression to say, this is a place you want to set your roots in, right? But until that point happens, we have the word fungible, right? We talked about it before, but we have a fungible workforce that could find a similar pay rate with a similar style of work somewhere else.
Right.
And so they're going to do what the free market allows them to do, which is go find and try, and that's their right. And as owners, I think we have to be very quick and clear about saying, you're going to be a good fit with our company, or you're not going to be a good fit with our company. A lot of times we use things like evaluations and whatnot to either bring people in more or take people out. But it's not just the evaluation piece where, just down here's your grid and whatever. But there's a relationship thing that happens along the way.
Totally.
Yeah, and I don't know how many times I've run into people that I love on a personal basis. Like, I would love to hang out with them. They're just the kind of friends I would want. But as team members or employees, they're horrible because they're, lacking this or lacking that.
Yeah.
And so I've made the mistake of bringing them in because of A, and then in the end I evaluate them out because of B. Well, some of that is on the person,
but a lot of it is
some of that
us
is
as
on
well.
me.
Totally.
Yeah, because they might have been the perfect fit for A, but I needed them for A and B, and so I needed to see that and go, okay, that's not, and that activity is not fun. But I think, I mean, for me, I know we've been here a long time. We talked about everything from VR to we haven't got to Area 51. We'll leave that there.
Well,
but yeah.
That's one of those minefields right now. Like, I want to see how did they actually end up invading it?
I don't know.
So you know how there was that whole social media thing
going I only heard about it because my daughter told me this morning. Yeah.
Of course.
But of course you know
That's
about it.
That's about the only subject we haven't covered.
Yeah, but I think the thing is, as much as this thing has been frustrating, I'm in it, and I will count myself as a success, not because of our size or our money, because I'm still in it, and I still want to be in it.
Yeah,
and in that sense, it's like
huge. Right?
Yeah. It's like this is exactly
There's so many times you could have checked out. Like, there are a lot of hills and troughs through the story of Copa Vida.
There's nobody here who's going to be able to offer me a job that's going to cause me to go.
Well, at any time, given the growth rate that you guys have experienced, at any time you could have said, hey, listen, we're up for sale. Anyone want to come and do this?
Sure.
But you haven't.
Yeah.
I mean, you're here.
Yeah.
And what excites me is your brain.
Mm.
I'm very excited about watching a man like you and with the team that you have and the openness with which you bring them into the conversation, and to watch you adapt to the changes that are happening, because you come from a different, you've got a noodle brain.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, you come from large manufacturing. You come with the openness.
Yeah, I think where I was lucky was that when I started, it was, I give credit to Melina, and her telling me I don't love coffee jarred me. And that made me see
Was that a pride thing?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. I came into this thing. Remember, the reason I chose coffee was because I was told that if I do something I love, I won't have to work another day in my life.
That's such
and
a lot
that
of shit.
reigned with me, right? So it was like this idea of like, if I love coffee, then it won't feel like work and it'll be great.
Bullshit.
Yeah.
Bullshit. Like, anyone who says that, like, I love my work, I breathe, I love everything that I do, but it's fucking work.
Yeah, and I think that's where I was shocked, because she was saying you don't love it, which means, oh yeah, then I'm not gonna. To have somebody tell you that you don't love something, it just really made me stop, and she didn't say it flippantly. She said it meaningfully, and I think it caused me to start into this thing from a perspective that was healthier than if I had just said, oh, I'm a lover of coffee.
Yeah.
I am all about the coffee, and therefore I can only make decisions based on how much I love coffee, and that's my identity. I am this champion of coffee. I never had that.
She realigned you.
She realigned me, yeah. So I give her credit for that. So, I think that conversation was something definitely got placed in my life to go, wake up. this is why you're doing it. It's not for the reasons that you think it is. Make sure you understand that. And so, I mean, the reason I try to be more listening to the others on my team is they know more than I do in certain areas. Not all, but certain areas they know better than I do. Yeah.
And I know for a fact from having conversations with them that they feel like they're better humans because of your leadership.
Oh, I hope so. Sometimes I think I fail at that too. But
our industry is lucky to have you, and I just wanted to say thank you.
Appreciate that.
I've learned a lot from you.
Likewise.
Thank you. I feel like my journey as an entrepreneur is more enriched for having you as a part of my journey, and I'm really grateful that we are in each other's lives.
And absolutely, and I know we don't see eye to eye on a lot of things.
No.
But I love...
Isn't that wonderful?
Yeah, I love your courage.
Thank you.
To go across an ocean to start something.
Oh, it's terrifying the fuck out of me. You know that.
And be willing to put yourself out there in the world and say, this is what I'm about. That takes a lot of courage. And the thing I think I appreciate, because there's a lot of folks who say it and do it, but you back it up with work behind it to make that happen. So I totally love our conversations and the challenges that we put in front of each other over the past 5 years.
Thank you. And you the greatest gift that you give me is that you open my mind further.
Thank you.
And that's a huge currency for me.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
So cheers to you, friend.
Oh, absolutely. Let's do it.
And
hopefully we'll end up back in Sydney with our families again, and it'll be fun.
Wouldn't that be great? Now, where can people check out Copa Vida?
So we have our location in East Village,
Here
in San Diego, as well as on 655 Broadway, which is right next to the train station. We have Carmel Valley location, as well as Sorrento Valley.
Yep.
We have a really cool 40-foot shipping container coffee shop in Carlsbad. And we just opened up a pop-up in San Marcos, which will eventually turn into a larger full-size. So we have two kinds of coffee shops, those with a kitchen and those without. And so we have two different models. And then obviously Pasadena. But the place I love to invite people to, especially if you're in the coffee world, is come to our roastery in Pasadena. Every Friday, 10 o'clock, we have open cupping for anybody who walks in. Anytime you just want to come and get a cup of coffee, come by. And I've met so many amazing people.
Really?
Coffee.
They just show up to tastings and...
Yeah, random people just come in and we end up talking. I mean, the owners of Cafe de Leche, for example, they were across the street buying the stuff at Restaurant Depot, smelled the coffee and looked it up on Google and walked in.
No way!
And we're we ended up talking to each other and ended up introducing me to a Guatemalan farmer. So it's like, I love this.
This industry is so great for that.
Things like that I just love. That organic thing. Yeah.
And Copa dash
Vida.
.com.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, friend.